My name is Kate, and I'll be representing the Locusta migratoria, also known as the African migratory locust.
And my name is Samantha, and I will be representing the Xenopsilia cleopes, also known as the Oriental rat flea. And we will be debating on which one of these insects had the biggest impact on human history. Both of these insects are known for their large impact and detrimental economic disaster that they had caused. However, we are debating on which one had the biggest impact. Stay tuned to figure out.
The Locusta migratoria, also known as the African migratory locust, is an insect that is knownly found in most of Africa south of the Sahara Desert. They are often found in climates with high humidity. Many studies have linked locust storms to hot climates, leaving places with those climates extremely affected. The locust has a segmented body with three main parts. It has the sensory organs, the thorax, and two pairs of wings and three pairs of legs. The legs of the locust are extremely strong, so that helps them jump. The life history of an African migratory locust consists of the egg state, nymph stage, and adult stage. Locusts can lay from between 30 to 100 eggs at one time. These eggs hatch between 2 to 6 weeks. They have a survival strategy that the locusts use so they will remain dormant if the weather is bad. Locust nymphs molt 5 to 6 times, increasing in size after each molt is complete. Nymphs also move by hopping and are very active because they are mostly searching for food to grow. There are two different behavioral phases that are called solitary and gregarious. The solitary phase are found in low density populations, so when there's less locusts and they're really calm. But then the gregarious is when they have a lot of population, they start to swarm. Locust impacts human society mainly because of the agricultural impact. One single locust swarm can eat the same amount of food as 10,000 people in one day. Throughout history, farmers have lost their entire farms or grasslands for their livestock, which has resulted in extreme food shortages. Governments have spent millions of dollars trying to control these locusts to make up for the food shortages.
The Xenophilia cleopes, also known as the Oriental rat flea, it's a type of insect that's known to inhabit more warmer, humid tropical climates, as well as sewer systems. They prefer to stay in these because they're unable to regulate their own body temperatures, so they use the heat and humidity to keep themselves warm. And because they like to live in the sewers, that's where they get their main host, the rat, which is where they get their name. They latch onto these rats, and that helps them spread from place to place in a relatively quickly manner. And these fleas, they inhabit these major cities, and one of the most impactful diseases that these fleas contributed to causing is the Black Death. Does that ring a bell? Well, these insects completely took over and killed a third of Europe in the form of a bubonic, pneumonic, septicemic, and these people didn't have the immune system to fight back on this, and so it was a disastrous outbreak. Today we know how to identify these fleas and their life cycle, and so that kind of helps us prevent the outbreaks, but it's difficult to see how um, they latch on because of their color. They are a light to medium brown, so they camouflage with their hosts. And so this makes it very easy for them to spread. They will latch onto these hosts and lay their eggs, and these eggs are like an oval round shape, and it takes about 2 weeks for the eggs to develop and move, and then they they hatch into larvae who do not feed on blood, but instead on cereal grains. The pupae is where they will hatch or they will form these cocoons and emerge in about 9 weeks, and then they will emerge into these blood-sucking fleas that we all know of. They are very picky and can only tolerate the temperatures that they feel most comfortable in, which is around 65 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and will jump from host. And speaking of jumping, the oriental rat flea has elastic proteins known as resin that allows them to jump up to 97% of their stored energy. Their behavior is often referred to as parasitic and motile, and I think that describes them very well.
While the flea caused mass death and destruction throughout the Middle Ages in Europe, the locust contributed to a large famine that left thousands of people without food and in debt. The largest locust swarm was in history occurred in the summer of 1875 in the Rocky Mountains. Locust covered 198,000 square miles in the Midwest of the United States. During the swarm, researchers projected that there would be anywhere from 3.5 to 12.3 trillion locusts that swept across the nation. There has not been many casualties because of locusts, but the loss of food led to a large famine and people starving. As a result, the United States Army had to distribute food to settlers in the region to prevent famine from 1875 to 1876. The plague was the first in time that the federal government had to help people because of the occurrence of the natural disaster. Many researchers have also said that the locust storm pushed for the disappearance of the buffalo in which roam the Great Plains.
While the locust swarm does seem pretty impactful, but the plagues of the oriental rat flea caused during the Middle Ages and even before that caused deaths in the millions. So, approximately 40 to 50 million people died during the Black Plague. And not only this, but this specifically also caused another infamous outbreak called the Justinian Plague. And for those of you who know your history, this is the plague that took down the last of the Roman Empire. And to think that one insect could take down an entire empire, and one of the most powerful empires, nonetheless. The reason that this spread so quickly is because of the trade routes that the fleas would be able to access because they were with rats. And so the rats would get on the boats and they would go all over the world. And so all this death of the plague caused a huge impact on the economy, where the high mortality rate caused agricultural imbalances due to the number of workers working on the farms decreasing, and the merchants that sold the products not being able to sell because there was a sickness. And so the locust outbreak had the government aid in the recovery of the loss of crops, and so they had help. The Justinian and the Black Plague, the government didn't do anything. They were on their own, and so they had to aid themselves. And this is why the round is so impactful to the survival of human history. They had nowhere to go, and they had to fight for themselves.
Although the flea was impactful, the locust swarm caused many acres of farmland to be destroyed and grazing pastures to be gone. The locust plague surrounded many states such as Nebraska, Montana, Kansas, and Texas. Compared to the other swarms, the 1874 plague happened at the same time as a record drought in the Midwest and the Great Plains. Crop damage was estimated to more than $200 million in damages, but that did not include the effects on animal quality of life. Livestock in this region did not have any grass to graze on and experienced great loss of income because they did not have any cattle because they were all dying because they didn't have any food to eat. The loss of livestock had a huge impact on farmers when needing meat to feed their families, selling cattle for income, or needing livestock for cleaning up the affected areas.
Well, it can be argued that the locust swarm caused detrimental effects on animal quality of life. The rat flea is known for its parasitic mannerisms that cause harm to many animal species. The main source of nutrition comes from the blood of mammals, and so they would latch on and suck the blood of, most notably, rats, dogs, cats, and humans. And so biting of the host is what caused the bacteria to spread. And Not only this, but they would carry tapeworms that would infect rats and mice, causing them harm to that specific host. While its preferred hosts were small mammals, they had the ability to hide into the fur and cause more damage, and more species were able to become infected because of how the small animals would pass on the infection. And so, the specific bacteria that is known to infect the lives as well as reproduce in the forests of the flea cause the flea to starve. And and the specific bacteria, it would infect this flea, and that's what caused all this infection. And so the locusts do not have the bacteria that would infect the mammals that the flea was able to carry. And that just illustrates how impactful that this rat flea was. It could infect so many different mammals, while the locust only infected the crops.
The African migratory locust has had such a large impact on society throughout history because of the devastating impact of just one swarm. The insect's ability to travel and cover miles of ground in just one day and cause crops to be completely gone represents the impact it has made. Any place with high levels of humidity and moist zones are subject to possibly having a swarm. Due to the quick reproduction of these insects, populations grow at a rapid rate, and that makes them very hard to control. Locust swarms can have anywhere from 1 million to 12 million locusts flying around, eating everything in sight. Locusts are largely used in scientific research for neuroscience and swarm behavior. Researchers have focused mainly on the nervous system, studying how they process sensory information. They have also used locusts to study the way insects react to smells and visuals and have been able to understand how insects' brain react to certain motions. So basically, one motion can cause a large swarm of these locusts. The swarm behavior of locusts is extremely important to study so researchers can potentially predict the next swarm so this won't happen again. These insects are important. These swarms threaten the possibility of famines, so understanding their behavior is better to help control efforts so a swarm like the 1875 plague does not happen again. The history of the locust has been extremely detrimental. Let's just hope this history does not repeat itself.
The Oriental rat flea has a large impact on human history, and it panned out to the mass death and destruction of many societies. The warm climate of the flea allowed it to easily find a preferred host and spread quickly. The information we have now greater helps prevent what happened in the past. However, it still is unknown how to completely eradicate this. More pandemics are surely to arise with the death toll not being as high, but it still is possible for an outbreak to occur. The locust swarms did cause detrimental destruction and change the course of history, but I would argue that the Oriental rat flea changed the history in the large part of Europe, and that contributed to the downfall of the last empire. That is a large task for such a small insect. And as fun as this was, I do believe that is all we'd have time to discuss. So, after hearing about our insects' lifestyles and our impacts on human history, who do you believe is responsible for the biggest change? Thank you for listening.
Wow, I really